Hey there, dear viewers. Welcome to Obsessed with Werewolves. I'm so glad you're here because I know you, like me, have a passion for all things werewolf. From their captivating tales to their mysterious nature, we're going to explore it all. So, let's dive right in and satisfy our obsession together. Chapter 6. The week's weather turned out to be more favorable than Harley thought it would. As such, a few days later she laid a blanket out in the backyard after work and got back into the drama that was her romance book. Dorian obviously loved Taylor, but until he was able to work past his commitment issues and realize Taylor wasn't going to leave him like his deadbeat mom did, their relationship would never flourish. Hours passed, the sun began to set, and she'd just gotten to the part where Dorian finally realized he loved Taylor when... "What are you doing?" The muscles in her arms turned to liquid and the book fell straight out of her hands. Shit. Next to her, Bailey clutched at her stomach, laughing. "You should have seen your face." "That wasn't nice," said Harley, though it came out as more of a complaint than angry. "Just trying to keep you on your toes." "Darlin', so..." Bailey kicked back, resting on Harley's blanket with her hands behind her head. "What are you doing?" Harley flipped through her book until she found her spot, which she then dogged, reading. "For fun." A grin spread across her face. "Wicked. Yeah. What are you doing here? More importantly, what should you be doing instead of scaring people?" Bailey flicked short brown hair from her eyes. "I picked up patrol for Will." Her curiosity spiked at his name. Oh, Bailey's eyes danced, her grin impossibly growing. "Girl, little witch girl. I see you." Harley sniffed, the other girl jackknifty into a sitting position. "Don't worry, I'm all about girl solidarity, so I won't say anything. There's nothing to say. He's just been really nice to me since I've gotten here. I appreciate it." Bailey had begun picking at the grass by her side. "You have to admit, he's pretty nice to look at." The youngness in Bailey's face made Harley wonder about her age. She had a bit of a childlike personality, which definitely was refreshing, but that made her seem a bit young. Maybe 18. Was 18 old enough to be on patrol? "How old are you?" "Bailey." "Just turned 20 to last month." Wow, much older than she thought. "Happy belated birthday." "Thanks. Darlin', did you start patrolling after college? That would be nice to do." Maybe Harley would be able to find another way to contribute to the pack. Not patrolling. She'd need to be able to shift for that. Babysitting. But that sounded so minuscule. "Nah, school was never my thing," Bailey said, grabbing full handfuls of grass now. "And that's okay. I'd rather spend my time doing something worthwhile, something that I love. That happens to be keeping the pack safe. What made you decide on that?" Bailey exhaled sharply through her nose. "I have an older brother who I used to fight with a lot. He was the one who put the idea in my head. I always liked a rough house with the best of men. So in the end I decided I wanted to use those skills to help the pack. Kensington isn't huge, but our territory covers most of it, and that's still a lot of ground to cover. The more the merrier. You know what we should do." Bailey barely let herself take a breath before she continued. "We should go for a run." God, she wished she could. Harley didn't mind running in general, but after being in a pack and realizing a run meant let's shift and push our wolves as fast as they could go, she wasn't much of a runner. It must be such a wonderful thing to be able to transform into a different form and run. To have not two, but for legs to push you faster and faster. To let the wind whip through your fur in a sharp movement and smell all the fresh scents of the earth. To not be afraid of forest and the dark secrets that they can hold. Some deep part of her inner being craved that mental picture with a desperation that surprised her. But she bit that desperation down and made herself face facts. She was latent, which meant she would never shift. never know what it truly meant to be a wolf shifter. She could never go on runs without holding others back. Some guys or her old pack made fun of her for her latency. "What the hell are you doing here then?" They had laughed. "You're in a frickin' wolf pack." She wanted to run away from the well of sadness that rose in her chest at the thought, or rip it straight from beneath her rib cage in general. "I'd love to run with you, Bailey, but I can't. I'm latent." Bailey looked at Harley in confusion, and Harley wondered if maybe she hadn't heard her clearly. "I'm latent," she repeated. "I got that, darlin'." Bailey said, "But I'm not seeing where that comes into play here. I won't be able to keep up." "So you don't want me to hold you back?" Bailey lost the ever-present smile and narrowed her eyes. With the somewhat tight line of her jaw, it made for an intimidating picture. "Did I say I didn't want you to hold me back?" "No, but then don't worry about it." Harley picked at the edge of a page in her book. "I don't think it's a good idea." As if finally making up her mind about something, Bailey sat forward. Look, I know we haven't known each other for very long, but I feel like it's still my job to say this." She took a breath. "Don't let your latency prevent you from doing things you want to do. That's not a crutch, and you shouldn't let it be. You just gotta do what you want to do and take life by the reins." It was good advice, but sometimes saying something and actually putting it into action were two separate ball games. She tried to play the tough, go-getting girl before, and her old pack and had failed miserably. When it came down to it, wolf shifters didn't like people who were different. They couldn't relate, and instead they chose to take it out on her, like she'd done something wrong. Like she'd chose to be this way. "I think I'll pass." Harley looked down at the book in her lap, ticking at the edge. "Thank you, though." Bailey left soon after that, and Harley got back to her book. There wasn't much of the sun left, and she wanted to continue reading until the light was gone completely. At some point, right around the turning point in her novel, Harley fell asleep. Her dreams, small flashes that they were, reminded her of the past. A father teaching his daughter to ride a bike. A mother helping her son to read at the kitchen table while a little girl colored. A brother and his friend wrestling in the grass. Even in her sleep, longing materialized in an ache that stuck with her until long after she woke. When her eyes opened, the sky had long since set and transitioned into darkness. "Bailey, I'm latent." Bailey wanted to stab herself. She should have realized, should have known about Harley's latency. Her wolf could tell something was off about the newest pack member, but until it was right in front of her, she still stood by what she told Harley. Being latent should not prevent her from doing what she wanted or letting her run with the pack. But damn, to be latent, what would Bailey do without her wolf? The animal buried inside her helped keep her sane. When things got to be too much, she was able to retreat back and let her wolf take care of it. Her wolf made her stronger, made her tougher, and because of it she was able to be the individual she wished to be. Bailey made her way to the Alpha's office. There was a lieutenant meeting tonight, which was why Bailey had to cover Will's patrol shift. Will wasn't a lieutenant, but he was the pack's rogue hunter, and that was pretty close. Rogue hunters were in a hierarchy all their own. They had to be someone who could obey the Alpha's orders, yet at the same time be responsible for keeping the pack safe, even if it meant going past the Alpha's orders. The good of the pack always came first. Any competent Alpha would never let that be an issue, but there had been a few rogue hunters who had to ignore the Alpha's orders so that the whole pack could be protected. The Alpha's office was on the ground floor of the house, in the hallway right by the kitchen. Warren, a hulking-sized lieutenant, stepped out with papers in his hand as she got there. She always liked Warren. He was kind to her, when others were not. When the girls her age in the pack started calling her names because she was a tomboy and preferred to hang out with guys than girls, he sat her down and told her to let it go. They can't understand what it's like to be different, he had said. And the only way they know how to respond to that is by using mean words. He grinned down at her as she approached. Well, if it isn't my favorite little lady. A laugh burst out of her. Warren, how is Charlotte? Charlotte was a small shrimp of a girl with more kindness in her skinny body than Bailey had ever seen. Warren and Charlotte had been mates for as long as she could remember, and the dedication they both had towards each other gave Bailey hope. Maybe someday she'd be able to find someone as devoted. Maybe. Warren's expression softened at the mention of his mate. Did he realize he always did that? She's keeping me on my toes. That's for sure. Bailey jerked her chin in the direction of the door. Is Will in there? Warren tutted. Leaving me so soon? He shook his head in joking disappointment. I always knew I'd end up fighting our rogue hunter someday. Fighting him. For your honor, of course. He grinned wolfish-like. Gotta make sure the boys are worthy. If she blushed easily, her face would have been betrayed. That day doesn't have to be today. She assured. I just need to talk to him. With an exhausted sigh, Warren poked his head back through the doorway. William, you have a suitor at your door. Then he patted her on the head and made his exit. It took Will a minute or two to wrap up. Bailey rested against the wall, tapping her foot in a rhythm while she waited. Surprisingly, it wasn't Will who stepped out first, but Cameron. Bailey frowned up at him. What are you doing at the meeting? Amusement settled over her pack member's face. Nice to see you too. Bales. Will shouldered his way past Cam. Why are you standing in the doorway? Cameron gestured at her. There's a monkhin in my way. Bailey scoffed, her hands going to her hips. I'm not a monkhin. The side of Cameron's lips twitched. What are you? 5'2", she sniffed. 5'2". Then you're a monkhin. Aggravated, she turned to Will. Can I talk to you for a moment? Sure thing. They both glanced at Cameron. He held up his hands, palms out. Hey, don't let me stop you. Will pointed his thumb behind him. I have to drop off some papers in Oliver's office. Walk with me. Unlike the Alpha's office, Oliver's office was on the second floor near his quarters. The two of them passed the marble-countered kitchen and the pristine couches of the sitting room on their way up there. I need to talk to you about Harley. Though his walk never slowed or stuttered, Bailey could still feel Will's attention snap straight to her. Through the pack bond, his wolf butted up next to hers. What about her? She needed to know if Will knew about Harley's issue without coming straight out and saying it. She realized all at once that maybe Will didn't know about Harley's latency. What if Harley didn't want him to know? Bailey bit her lip and hesitated. Which? Of course, Will noticed. Bailey. The urge to tell Harley's secret bubbled up in her chest, but she closed her throat around it. Bales, I can feel your wolf getting antsy. What's up? Has Harley ever? Shit. Already she was messing this whole thing up. Will stopped at the top of the stairs, right next to the window blackened from the darkness of outside. His eyebrows went up as he waited. Damn it. Bailey, you already screwed this up. Has Harley ever talked about her old pack? Her old pack? He echoed. No, why? Do you remember before she left? That is, if she ever. Spit it out? Bailey? He said, crossing his arms. Is something wrong with Harley? Well, hell, she couldn't say she didn't try. Antwell was a good guy. He was trustworthy of this information. So if Harley was going to be mad that Bailey spilled the beans, she couldn't be too mad because Will would have her back. Bailey gave an exhausted sigh. Okay, look, I know you told me to keep an eye on her for you. He stepped into her space. Is someone messing with her? No, not at all. She's actually a really chill person. If anyone messed with her, I'd be the first in line to put a claw through their eye. She shifted her weight. It's just, she told me something that surprised me. And, did you know she was latent? He frowned. Latent? Then, understanding lit his expression. She never shifted. The muscles in his arms tightened. Why? Bailey shrugged. She didn't say. She played it off pretty well, though. Will drew the mental connections in an instant. Yeah, but to be in a wolf pack without being able to shift, that's got to have an effect on anyone. Through the pack bond, Will's wolf paced. What would make a wolf go latent? Bailey asked. Will shook his head. I've never heard of a wolf going latent before, except maybe in rumors. The attack, maybe. Bailey asked through pinched lips. Could that have caused it? I don't know. He said, his jaw tight. But I'm going to find out. Chapter 7. 3 states away, south of Kensington, a camp stood near a forest line. Among the tents and bonfires, people milled about with a hush. The darkness of night that befell over the camp meant much more to them. It brought with it attention, bated breath, and unease. 2 gentlemen, rough from traveling and the weather, sat near each other next to a bonfire on 2 logs drawn from that same deadly forest behind their backs. Do you think she's going to let him run tonight? One with a receding hairline and a gray beard asked the other. The other man, younger and blinded by ignorance, leaned his elbows on his knees. Does she have a choice? The answer came in the form of silence. After a while, the gray-bearded man hit his fist into the log he sat on. It's not fair. This disease damn well takes away their free will. I heard Tom's niece is showing the same signs Dominic did at the beginning. The old man cursed. I've seen what this does to people. It rips them from their right mind. These beasts need to be taken out. The younger man glanced over his shoulder. You want Celine to hear. She'll rip you a new asshole. And then you can forget all about your crappy reward. Further into the heart of the camp, a woman with long blonde hair paced in front of a card table serving as a desk. She tapped a calloused and worn finger to her bottom lip. I don't get it. She whispered to herself. Highlighted articles, notes, and journal entries all sat on the card table. Spread out among the numerous papers rested a crudely drawn plan for a microchip. Frustration boiled in her veins. She had been on this ridiculous hunt for years now without any luck. It should have never taken this long. It should have never been this damn difficult. Ma'am. A teenager stuck his head through the flap that served as a door. A cool breeze followed him in. Temperatures were dropping and it made for a cold night. Her troop would have to buckle down hard tonight. She should have just rented out a block of hotel rooms. Except, making up reasons for the huge travel group was beginning to get harder and harder with people asking questions and wanting to know more and more. It was much easier to rent out a campground and call it a day. Get in here. Brad. You're letting the heat out. Brad, most likely the youngest of her troop, quickly stepped in. Sorry, ma'am. I just wanted to let you know. The group you sent to Harper Corporations has returned. The lack of even a spark of hope in her chest was a testament to how long she'd been doing this. Hope became harder to come by the more time that passed. Reality was beginning to set in. Well, send them in here. Oh, of course, ma'am. Not 2 minutes later, Blackthorn stepped in, followed closely by the 2 of his crew he handpicked to join him on the infiltration project. Celine, Blackthorn, Celine half, sat on the card table, her arms crossed. What have you got? Blackthorn sat in the single-fold outchair in the tent. He crossed his legs. A whole lot of crap. Our favorite doctor worked with Harper in the 80s. He barely even conceived the idea for his research at that point. You checked the archives. Blackthorn raised a single eyebrow. I'm not an amateur, he said. That corporation lives in the Stone Age. All of their files are in a file room in the basement. And they're all paper. Took almost the whole damn night. Celine's spine straightened. You have nothing for me. Nothing. The hiss of the lady's words had Blackthorn raising a hand. Now hold up. You didn't let me finish. I'm losing my patience here. Blackthorn. You know what happens when I lose my patience. Yeah. Cities burn down. Earthquakes take out most of the Western Hemisphere. I've already had that whole spiel. Blackthorn. Celine snapped. Blackthorn gestured to the surprisingly composed woman at his shoulder. Marla, can you please give our wonderfully glorious leader the file? Celine swiped the file from Marla's hands and scanned the contents. A frown made its way onto her face. What use could I possibly have for an obituary? Blackthorn, in the process of lighting up a smoke, rolled his eyes. I'm going to cut you slack, because anger makes me fucking blind too. He puffed out a small cloud. Harper might live in the Stone Age, but they keep their files pretty up to date. Did you ever take the time to read our doc's obituary? Celine snapped the file closed. Why would I do that? He's dead. We made sure of that. Another cloud of smoke drifted from Blackthorn's spot. We never made sure everyone was dead. Celine read over the obituary once more. Survived by his daughter. Hardly what use is the girl to me. She was a child at the time. Blackthorn gave a cough and waved away some of his smoke pollution. But she's a possible lead. Who knows what she's seen or heard? Celine was ready to strangle Blackthorn. What use could a child be to her? No wonder her search has taken her so long. Her troop seemed to be comprised of idiots. Well, now that we've wasted our time with that endeavor. She threw the file on the card table, sending papers scattering to the floor, and headed to the door. Where the hell are you going? Celine barely resisted the urge to flip him off. To let Dominic out of his cage for a run. And with that, she left, the flap of the tent waving behind her. Harley. The next morning, Harley gripped her butterfly necklace tight in one hand. Bailey. I don't think this is a good idea. Bailey, knee-deep in water, waved the comment away. Don't worry about it. Darlin', I do this all the time. Her eyes, which flicked left and right, never moved from the clear water below. After some major convincing, Bailey managed to wrangle Harley into what she called exploring. But Harley wasn't too sure that Bailey's definition of exploring was the same as hers. To Harley, exploring meant discovering new places and walking paths that one had never before. To Bailey, exploring meant looking at her favorite places in the trees. And trying to catch fish in a creek. Bailey's eyes followed something gently swaying back and forth. Then her hand shot out like lightning. Got it. A dull gray fish flapped between her fingers. It couldn't have been longer than her pointer finger, though what it lacked in size it more than made up for in the effort department. Harley could almost feel the panic radiating from the fish. Bailey laughed with glee. Would you look at that? I caught one. Bailey celebrated her catch a bit more, then threw the little guy back into the creek. On the shore, Harley sat with her arms around her knees on a large muddy brown rock. The sun shone high and bright in the slow-moving water. Bailey had led Harley through quite a bit of forest to get them to this spot. It had taken Harley all the courage and strength she had to get through the tangle of trees. Luckily for her, the area by the creek wasn't as dense as some of the other areas. Harley could see the wispy white clouds and the star as 30 to 40 feet around her, which made it a whole lot easier to talk herself out of a panic attack. So far, she'd barely avoided two on their way over here. Bailey wasn't an idiot. She more than likely heard every time Harley's breath changed, but she hadn't said anything about it. Harley was grateful for that. All right, girlfriend. Your turn. Her friend wiped her hands on her jeans. I think I'm good. With no effort at all, Bailey leapt straight onto Harley's rock and sat down. Come on. It's really not that hard. I'll show you the trick. Thanks, but it's not really my kind of thing. Harley rested her chin on the top of her knee and slowly felt the familiar grooves in her butterfly necklace with her fingertips. Bailey leaned back on her hands. I can get that. Not everyone is one with nature. Take Jamie, the alpha's daughter. For example, you can't get that girl near anything that comes out of the ground. I like nature, Harley assured. It's better if I observe. If she got too close to anything, her mind ended up finding all of the similarities between now and 13 years ago. The wind took that moment to brush through the trees, and Harley shivered as the breeze tickled her back. Instead of providing a relief from the hot sun, it reminded her of how exposed she was in this forest. Vulnerable. It never goes away, does it? Bailey tilted her head to the side. A wolf-like action. Harley frowned. The past, she clarified. You can never really forget it, can you? The resigned tone told her that Bailey knew a lot more about rough pasts than she let on. Harley squinted up at the sky, following the brown hawk that smoothly glided through the air. Sometimes I worried that no matter how much you resist, the past becomes a piece of you. At that, Bailey shrugged. Maybe, but that doesn't mean it has to define you. Her new friend fixed herself so she sat cross-legged and turned towards her. She took a breath. Jamie is my half-sister. The sudden statement caught Harley off guard. My mom had an affair with Alpha Mark. She curled a barely long enough brown strand behind her ear. To be fair, it was right before the Alpha met his mate, Catherine. My mom had a moment of weakness, I guess, and then I was 9 months later. My step-dad was super pissed though. Bailey stared off into the creek, and Harley let her drift off. To be honest, I think he might still be, but he loves my mom, so he still treats her well. Me. Not as much. My brothers knew about it. She continued. I think that's why they roughhoused with me all of the time. There was always something more than just wrestling. I could feel it. Do your parents live with the pack? She couldn't say she'd ever even heard someone mention Bailey's parents. Bailey shook her head. Nope. My mom and step-dad decided to stay with his family's pack after the affair. I don't blame him. Why aren't you with them? Another shrug. Her focus still on the water not far away. I couldn't really take it after a while. Everyone in my family knew I didn't belong, and the only one I felt really wanted me there was my mom. So, I came here. Harley sent Bailey a sympathetic smile, though she wasn't sure if she caught it. The two girls listened to the quiet rush of the water and the warning cry from the hawk who'd flown out of sight. Harley liked the gentle silence. Somewhere deep she knew Bailey wasn't expecting a response, just an ear to listen. Nothing Harley could say would make the situation better. There wasn't any advice to repair the damage, yet her friend knew she was there. I can't play hide and seek anymore, Harley admitted. She traced random patterns into her kneecap. That's what my brother and I were playing when she broke off, then tried again. I can't watch other children play it either. The kids in elementary school hated me because of it. I just couldn't ever get myself to. And I have a hard time in forest. They remind me of it. Must be hard being a wolf, and Bailey winced. Sorry, this time it was Harley's turn to shrug. You can't really miss what you've never had. Do you ever feel anything, though? From your wolf side? Not really. I always want to, though. I want to run with the pack. I want to feel the sun in my fur. Has it ever gotten close? Harley shook her head no. It's kind of like, my wolf is sleeping. Bailey's fingers tapped against her knee. Okay, I have to admit something. Darlin', she chewed at her lip. I may or may not have told Will you were latent. Harley would be lying if she said her heart didn't beat faster at the thought of Will knowing. About having a wolf in a wolf pack was a recipe for ridicule. It meant she was missing a key aspect needed to truly be a part of pack life. She'd always be on the sidelines, wanting to join in, but she'd never have the skills to perform. And now Will knew just how much of an outsider she would always be. A little part of her wanted to be mad at Bailey for stilling to Will. And yet, the damage was already done. He already knew. The only thing she could do from here was move forward. What did he say? How did he react? Bailey slowly slid down the rock and picked up a pebble from the ground. He was confused at first. It's not too often you hear of a latent. Then, Bailey tossed the pebble in the creek. It sunk with a watery bloop. He said he wants to help. Harley frowned and rubbed at her forehead. Help. There's nothing he can change. Maybe not. But he's looking into it. The idea of Will researching for her should have made her feel better. Instead, she grew anxious at thought of someone digging into her weakness. If she wanted him to stop, though, then she had to approach him about it, and the thought almost seemed worse somehow. Harley and Bailey spent a little more time by the creek before heading back to the pack house. To Harley's relief, the sun was still relatively high in the sky when they returned. Chapter 8. The following day, clouds spread across the sky. With those clouds came a certain quietness that made it a perfect day for reading. Harley loved any day that involved reading. After her work shift, she spent almost 2 hours finishing up her latest book. The characters Dorian and Taylor finally got together. Thank God. But the ending was her favorite part. All of the loose ends were tied, the antagonist taken care of, and the reader could tell that the two would have a very happy ending. Harley didn't mind reading about happy endings, but she knew that in real life they were a whole lot harder to come by. In real life, fate didn't play a role in who you ended up with. In real life, there wasn't always if ever a man ready to take on the whole world to keep a woman by his side. No, in real life families died, houses exploded, and little girls lost everything they've ever known. Maybe that was why Harley liked to read so much. Fake worlds always had happy endings. It seemed like a way better way to live. Someone knocked on the doorway. Harley read an article once about the importance of keeping your door open in college, and while she'd never been to college, she still felt the advice could be used. Unless she was changing, she'd made a habit to keep her door open. Then any time anyone walked by, they could either stop and talk or say hello as they passed. It wasn't a big difference, but the little hellos given by the other pack members made her feel more welcome. Or not. Dad wants to talk to you. Jamie grumbled from the doorway. Today, her long blonde hair had been swept up into an elegant-looking ponytail. Combined with the flowy pink-collared shirt and tight black skinny jeans, Jamie looked like she was more than ready for a retail photo shoot. Jamie was the one person Harley more than struggled to connect with. She didn't have a problem with her, but that didn't mean she couldn't feel the invisible barrier between them. There was just something so closed off about the girl it made Harley want to stay away from her. Harley closed the new romance book she'd opened. Oh, okay. Did he say why? Jamie smacked on a piece of gum. Does it matter now? She climbed off her bed, feeling suddenly awkward and out of place. I guess it doesn't. I'll be right there. Whatever. Jamie cast a quick look around her room. This place is so boring. It didn't take Harley long to see the place like Jamie did. Her room contained nothing more than the basics. A bed, a white dresser, a matching white nightstand. The suitcase under her bed was still packed. She hadn't had the effort to pull it out and unpack it yet, not that she wanted to. There wasn't anything on the walls save for a generic landscape picture hung up before she'd arrived. The only thing that indicated someone lived there was the unmade bed and the stack of books on the nightstand. I haven't done anything with it yet. Harley defended herself. Jamie stepped away from the door. Well, witch. You know what they say. A bedroom tells you a lot about a person. And with that, Jamie left, her long hair trailing behind her. The Alpha's office door had to be the most intimidating door in the entire pack house. Whoever designed the interior of the pack house did a great job with what they had been given. Most, if not all, of the rooms throughout the house had a modern, yet homey feel to them, and the hallway off of the kitchen that led to the Alpha's office was no different. The hallway had been painted a calm beige with the slightest tint of green. The hardwood floors were dark, probably mahogany, and all the fixings throughout followed this dark pattern. The frames lining the pictures on the walls were black. The lamps in the long, narrow hallway table black as well. She actually quite liked the color combination, but whoever had designed it had also decided to make all the doors in the hallway black as well. While black doors in themselves weren't that frightening, the Alpha's was. It stood at the very end of the hallway and could be viewed from the kitchen, but something about the door added weight to it. You're being stupid. Harley, just go knock on the damn door. There was nothing to worry about after all. Right, she hadn't done anything wrong. Well, she didn't remember doing anything wrong. She knocked on the door. Come on in, Harley. Alpha Mark called out, though how he knew it was Harley was beyond her. Hi, Alpha Mark. She carefully stepped in. The designer of the hallway had apparently decided to keep the theme from the hallway going. All of the Alpha's furnishings were the same dark color. His large desk, the floor-to-ceiling bookshelf behind him, and the leather couch near the entryway were all black. The only difference really was the walls. Instead of continuing with the beige green, the interior designer went with more of a brown beige. Though there were neatly organized stacks of papers on his desk all waiting to be looked at, Alpha Mark crossed his hands in front of him and gazed at her with a patience that suggested he had all the time in the world. Hello, Harley. How is your day going? She shifted, sadly aware of the visible awkwardness she portrayed. It's been okay. He waited expectantly as she read his next question off of his expression. I've been okay. She reassured. Good. Warmth entered his eyes. She never really noticed until now how his eye color seemed to dance between hazel and brown. To be honest, she spent most of her time with the Alpha avoiding his eyes rather than meeting them. Not only was it a sign of respect in a wolf pack, but it was also an unwritten challenge if a wolf did not look away. Because she didn't necessarily have a wolf, she never got an overwhelming urge to look down like some of the more submissive wolves did, so she had to constantly remind herself not to look him in the eye for too long. His wolf wouldn't like it. She picked a spot on his desk to stare at instead of a small glass frog that sat near his computer keyboard. I wanted to talk to you about your latency, the Alpha said. Latency, latency, latency. Why did everyone suddenly want to remind her of it? I appreciated you sharing the information with me when you first got here. He readjusted one of the piles on his desk. I know it is not an easy subject, and I decided to give you a bit of time to really integrate yourself into the pack before I approach this. What could the Alpha possibly want her to do that involved her latency? I've already spoken to Will about it, and he seems to be right on board. He said, so I'm going to have you start training with him tomorrow. Train? She asked, uncertain. His fingers drummed the desk. I take a lot of pride in knowing that each one of my wolves is able to defend him or herself. Usually, but also that they can learn their limits. Your case is quite different, but I will not let that get in the way of your safety. Will and I both have agreed to make sure that you know enough of a sense of self-defense so that should something happen, you'll have something to help you out. Hence, the training. He wanted her to learn self-defense. She could see where that could be helpful, but the idea seemed to come out of nowhere. She replayed the Alpha's words in her head. He and Will had talked about her latency. Together. The mortification of that mental picture made her face heat up. "I will make it a command if I have to," he said when she didn't respond. Frowning, Harley blinked and shook her head. No, I understand. Perfect." His fingers interlocked again. "I can pair you up with someone else for training, but I'd much rather put you with Will. He teaches a lot of the teenagers and will have a better feel for where you're at." "Okay." She didn't know much more of what to say. "That will be all. Harley. She gave a jerky nod and practically scrambled out the door. The entire rest of the day was spent in a daze. She would have to spend who knows how much time training with the pack's rogue hunter. The very same man who not only shared a past with her, but also knew of her weakness. And, as of lately, the one man who she might have a weak spot for. Chapter 9. Harley had failed to ask when raining would start. Looking back on it, she didn't know why she thought it would start later. Maybe she'd been holding too tightly onto the idea that Will would be nice and let her sleep in like an actual human being. Instead, she'd been tackled. Wakey. Someone shouted in her ear. Once the initial panic was over, her brain immediately telling her she was being attacked, she let out a groan and burrowed further under the covers. Rarely, a Bailey somehow found her hip and tickled it. "This is your wake-up call." She mumbled something into her pillow that sounded an awful lot like, "Go the hell away." I would, but I can't." The sheets disappeared and Harley was left looking bleary, eyed at her friend. "Our all-powerful rogue hunter wants to get you started. Why couldn't we start later?" At that, Bailey shrugged. "Will is a morning person, but I'm not. Isn't this supposed to be my training?" Her friend laughed. "It is. You know what? You go give him a piece of your sleep-deprived mind and I'll stand back for moral support." With a video camera in my hand. That sounded like a terrible idea. Harley didn't know Will very well, but she did know him enough to know that he could be stubborn when it came to defense and protection. "Ugh, fine. I'm getting up." It took her 20 minutes to brush her hair and teeth and put on a tee, shirt and sweatpants. She could have done it a lot faster if she had to, but she dragged her feet as a way to rebel at the god-awful hour. Her tiny clock on the dresser said 8. Bailey waited outside the doorway, ready. "As much as I'll ever be." She rubbed at her eye. "Where are we going?" "Anyway. Will trains the rest of the wolves in a clearing about a mile from the pack house. He wants us to meet him there this morning. Though I'm sure you'll be bouncing back and forth between the clearing and the workout room in the basement for the rest of your training." They began their walk over to where Bailey directed them. Because it was 8 in the morning, the sun was already out, but it hadn't gotten quite warm enough yet for Harley's taste. She should have grabbed a coat. Instead, she had to cross her arms to keep the cold from settling in. It took them about 15 to 20 minutes to find the clearing, and when they did, Harley's footsteps almost halted. There wasn't much to the area really, it was just a section without trees. With the overhang of the trees, grass refused to grow much more than a few straggly patches here and there. She could smell the damp dirt at her feet, but that wasn't what had her freezing up. Will stood in the clearing ahead of them, his broad back to them. Wolves of all colors and sizes formed a loose circle around the commotion in the middle. Because of the angle, she couldn't quite see the violence, but she heard it, and that was enough. The encouraging howls of the wolves around the circle, the low rumbling growls, and an easy whine as two animals clashed. Her entire world tilted around her, her vision tunneling, and she grabbed at the nearest tree for balance. Harley, she closed her eyes to try and find her balance. Between the darkness closing around her and the weight on her chest, it was all she could do to keep breathing. Sparks danced across her eyes and the lightheadedness battled against her. Slender hands gripped her shoulders. "Will," Bailey shouted near her ear. "Breathe." Her brain screamed at her. Breathe. Set her on the ground. Will directed at Bailey. Harley, I need you to put your head between your knees. When she hesitated, he said, Come on. Har, you need to ground yourself. She did as he instructed. Slow, deep breaths. His voice was calm in her ear, reassuring. Breathe. You're okay. Just breathe. The world crept back to her in tiny increments and, after what seemed like forever, she was able to lift her head. Instead of focusing on Will and her eyes locked on the 8 or so wolves watching her. I shot down her spine. Dismissed. Will called out. You are all dismissed. The wolves scattered. I'm fine, she told them, unable to look at them. Bailey sucked in a breath, as if, darling, I've seen a lot in my time, but... Harley could feel the weight of Will's analyzing stare. She'll be okay, he said with quiet confidence. Well, Bailey hissed out. I said, she'll be okay. Bailey. They helped her up, watching her carefully. Though she succeeded in making the atmosphere awkward, she made herself stand up straighter and move past it. Will decided to smoothly move past it as well. Bailey, I'm good from here. Thanks. Bailey crossed her arms. I'll stay and watch, if it doesn't bother you. Harley frowned at her friend. You sure? Bailey, of course. I'd love to see him work you until you're dead. Alarmed, Harley glanced at Will. She's just kidding. Right. He shrugged. I can neither confirm nor deny that. Oh gosh, what was she getting into? Bailey parked herself next to a tree on the edge of the clearing, while Will led Harley in some warm-up stretches. Arms higher, he called out. Harley already felt out of breath. They're high. She puffed out, slowly doing arm circles. First it was arm circles, then it was 10 laps around the clearing, 20 lunges, 30 crunches, and finally 100 jumping jacks. It's going to be a slow start, Will said as she jumped, if this is how it's going to go. Aggravated, dead tired, and horribly embarrassed, Harley dropped her arms completely. What's the point? Will's lips thinned. What's the point of what? This. She threw her arms out, gesturing at everything and nothing. This whole thing. It's not like I'll ever be in a situation where I fight for the pack. The pack would never have a bumbling. Latent will fight for them, let alone a battle. You're just wasting your time. Something flashed behind his eyes. It's not about fighting for the pack at all. It's about learning to defend yourself. No matter what happens, I would have thought that you would know that. Harley bit back a snarky response and instead went with, Do you do this to all your trainees? He nodded. You have to teach the newly shifted the importance of keeping a tight leash on their wolves. Otherwise, control is easy to lose and becoming a feral wolf is a very real possibility. He picked up a skinny band and twig from the dirt. Our wolves might start out like this, but the athletic training helps them learn control, first through their bodies and then through their mind. She'd never have to worry about losing control. Never have to worry about a beast inside of her making decisions for her. Never have to think about her wolf taking over. But also, not ever truly getting to share in the experience of having a wolf. Will sighed, stepping closer until Harley had to tilt her head back to look him in the eye. Look, Harley, I know this isn't going to be easy. I know that. I remember my own oining. Izak. He sent her a gentle smile.
Matthias was better at it than me.
Hearing her brother's name from his lips sounded like a foreign language. She rarely spoke his name, only thought about him and her parents. Matthias, don't you remember? We started training the week of he cut off. Anyway, your brother was more naturally athletic than I was. Well, you were 12. She said, ignoring the way her throat had begun to ache. I don't think you can really judge a 12-year-old on his athleticism. Maybe not. Either way, Matthias started to show me up that first week. Harley bit her lip to keep in a sudden smile. It didn't help that you were kind of chubby. He scoffed. I was not. She shrugged. You kind of were. Willie. Will laughed then, and it was a sound she would continue to play over and over in her mind for the rest of the day. It was soft, but easy, and it flowed right through her ears. I'll have you know, I was big boned. Yeah, sure, whatever. Don't call me Willie. At 930, they racked up the rest of the training. Harley had been able to go back into it with a bit more determination and followed through with the rest of the exercises, though they might have been sloppier than Will liked. Afterwards, Will set up a training schedule with Harley well, more like he told her when they'd be training, which often fell right at the ass crack of dawn. The second that he told her she was free to go, she was out of there. Sweet freedom. Chapter 10. Will was a rogue hunter, a killer. He'd come to accept that fact pretty well over the years, but at first it had been hard. How do you justify that killing another creature is okay? That stopping a heart, the intake of breath, and cutting the once thoughtful mind of a being is necessary. But then he had been put into action, had seen the feral, out of their right mind wolves, and most of all, seen the damage that could happen if they weren't taken care of. He'd witnessed that damage firsthand when his best friend had been killed. After the horror and grief and disbelief of the attack passed, Will had gone back into training with a determination and strength others couldn't believe. He'd begun to work hard, even going as far as doing extra workouts at night on his only sculpted a section of his mind dedicated to making sure that another attack like this one would never happen again. He owed it to Matthias. His parents didn't understand, they still didn't. Terry and Shauna Gray couldn't believe that their son would be so willing to throw himself into danger. Didn't he care about how they would feel? Didn't they see that this job could easily land him into a wooden box in a hole in the ground? He'd almost let them talk him out of it too. The begging, the negotiating, the clean. It started to be too much, and right before he completed his third-level training, he considered dropping the entire idea altogether. Then he thought of Harley. If he'd been old enough, strong enough, he imagined himself defending his best friend's family. It wasn't his most rational thought. He knew, I knew, but it made him feel better to think that he would have done something if he could have. Since that wasn't an option, he joined up as a rogue hunter with the hopes he could help save other families and packs from the same fate. He wasn't the only rogue hunter in the area, but oftentimes he got called on by other packs to assist with any potential situations. He didn't mind, it was his job after all. Except he'd be lying if he said he didn't feel frustrated at the somewhat constant traveling. For a younger wolf, Will had acquired quite a bit of a record, one that almost shined. It had taken a lot of work, and a few scars, but he's made himself known around these parts. He owed it all to Abe, his trainer, who was the best rogue hunter and enforcer this side of the world had ever seen. After he passed his level 3 general training here at the pack, he'd gone down south near Mississippi to study with Abe, which was also another reason he didn't have the best relationship with his parents. They couldn't understand why he had to leave pack to train and why it was so important he trained under Abe. Yet Will knew if he wanted to be the best, then he had to study under the best. Of course, being a great rogue hunter still involved paperwork. Packs like to keep records, not only of happenings, but also of the wolves under their care. Any time Will went out and did a job, he had to follow up with a report. God, he hated reports. The Little River Pack had given him a month to send in a report on the feral wolf he'd taken out on their territory. It was a generous amount of time, considering the feral wasn't a wolf from their pack. Usually, when a kill was a bit closer to home, the pack gave him time to put a report together. Between funeral arrangements and mourning time, it often takes a while for the pack to want to know what happened. When an incident was not a wolf, the pack knew they often wanted the report as soon as possible. Poseidon rubbed his forehead. The paper in front of him proved to be difficult. His memory of the event came back mostly in Patch's sharp teeth, and an even fight, claws catching on his underbelly. He remembered the end result well enough, but he just couldn't quite get himself to write the damn thing. On the desk in front of him, his sleek black smartphone rang. "Hey, Will." Cameron spoke through the speaker. "Alpha just got a call about a possible situation to States over. All ready." He clicked his pen and set it down. "What kind?" "A couple of patrols noticed some movement along their territory. The Alpha has more details, but it sounds like they're calling in hunters to help out. Not every pack had rogue hunters. Some packs simply lived in denial about the frequency of rogues and ferals, while others struggled to find a wolf who wasn't an alpha strong enough to do the job. Either way, the packs without hunters had to petition to another pack's alpha if they wanted help. Will thought of himself as a power tool. He was sharp, honed, and had the potential to be a dangerous weapon, but if another wanted to use him, they would still have to get permission from the owner in this case, the alpha. Despite his tiredness, he chuckled. "If the alpha keeps loaning me out to people, I'm going to start feeling used. I can go with you." Cam offered. He wiped a hand over his face. No, I'll go. It could be nothing. If I need backup, I'll call you in. If you were any other wolf, I'd be nervous to send you out alone. But damn man, they don't call you one of the best for nothing. No wonder the packs want you." If Cam was trying to inflate Will's ego, he wasn't succeeding. "You're full of crap." If he was one of the best, he wouldn't have the beginnings of a scar on his chest. He'd seen the best, trained with the best, and he was nowhere close. He could tell Cam had shrugged at that, despite not being able to see him. "I tell it like I see it. Whatever," he grumbled. "Are you at the pack house?" "Yeah. Just got out of a meeting with Oliver. Tell Alpha Mark I'll be over in an hour," he said. That'd give him enough time to pack an overnight bag and get a few things in order. Cam. "What's up?" He couldn't just leave Harley without a trainer. Training was an everyday thing. If he let her take days off here and there, she wouldn't get as much out of it as he wanted her to. Doing a little bit of work each day not only builds her stamina, but confidence. He'd slowly watched her grow self-assured, little by little each day, despite the moaning and groaning she continued to do. "I'll need you to work with Harley while I'm gone. I can write up her regimen and have it to you before I go. You want me to work with her?" The surprise in Cam's voice made Will frown. "Why wouldn't I?" Silence over the line. "Well, I've come to notice your attachment." Surprise had him hesitating. "What are you talking about?" You know. Will, I've seen it. I am her trainer," he said through tight lips. "That is all." Cam dropped it. "Never mind. There's no way you'd fall for her. Forget I said anything." He coughed awkwardly. "I'll train Harley for you. No problem." Will resisted the urge to growl down the line. His wolf had begun to fidget inside of him, the inner beast agitated for some reason. "Thanks." He hung up the line after that. If he wanted to make good on his promise, he'd have to get packing soon. But he couldn't even think about leaving until this report had the final stamp. The deadline given to him pack was tomorrow, and if he would be traveling then, he had to get his shit together. He sighed and got to work. Will met up with Harley around lunchtime. She sat at the large dining room table, munching on dry Fruit Loops, her eyes tracing her paperback. Amused, Will took a moment to compose himself. "I think you're missing the milk." Harley jerked in surprise, scattering cereal pieces onto the table. Instead of glaring up at him, She frowned at the mess. Dang. Laughter bubbled up in his chest, but he choked it down. Maybe you should have gotten some actual lunch that isn't so aerodynamic. She finally looked up at him, some of her brown hair snaking in front of her face. Good afternoon to you two. Will, she said, pulling that chunk of hair behind her ear. Have you come to torture me more? The corner of his mouth twitched. He would not grin. He would not grin. Training is hardly torture. If I wanted to torture you, you'd know it. Irritation flashed quick over her face. The amount of satisfaction he got from aggravating her astounded him. There was just something fun about teasing her. I think you underestimate your routines, Captain. She gave him a lazy salute. Then it might make you happy to know that I won't be here for training for a couple of days. Instead of being happy like he'd predicted, Harley tilted her head to the side. Did she realize how much of a wolfish gesture that was? Interesting. Had she picked that up on her own, or did some part of her suppressed wolf influence her? Where are you going? He sat down in the chair next to her, snagging a tray for Loop. The sugar burst over his tongue as he crunched. I have some hunting business to take care of to state's over. But don't worry, I've given Cameron a list of all the workouts. He's under strict order to keep you in shape while I'm gone. Her dark eyebrows came together. What's happening to state's over? He shrugged. I won't know until I check it out. Could be nothing, but it could be something. She pushed her book away from her. You'll be careful, right? Now that he knew she was worried, he could see the signs, the slight downward curve of her mouth, the way she chewed at the inside of her bottom lip, and how her hand clutched at the silver butterfly necklace around her throat. His wolf wind at the thought of distressing her, and that fact alone made him uncomfortable. I've done this quite a few times, he assured her and himself. Nothing to worry about. She stayed quiet for a moment, her fingers messing with the corner of the open page of her book. I knew you were a rogue hunter, she admitted softly, not quite meeting his eyes. But for some reason I never thought about how often you have to go out, and she stopped. Finally she met his eyes. He'd be lying if he said he didn't feel distressed at the Holland was behind them. Just don't end up like Matthias. I won't, he said, caught up in the way her eyes revealed just how much the past had an effect on her. I promise. Now he just had to keep it. Thank you so much for joining me in this obsession with werewolves. I hope you've had a great time and can't wait to come back for more. Remember to subscribe, leave your comments, and share this passion with others. Until next time, keep being obsessed.